The darkness of deep space trembled as a violent surge of light tore through a distant colony. Towers crumbled like dust, and screams vanished into static across fractured comm channels. Elara watched, her heart pounding as the storm swallowed a city whole. The cosmic storm was alive, spinning with colors too strange to belong to nature. A single transport tried to break free, its engines flaring against impossible winds. Kael Draven muttered, "This is no storm, it's a weapon." His voice carried the weight of wars fought and lost. The survivor's signal cracked through static, desperate, begging for salvation that would not come. Elara pressed her trembling hand against the console, whispering, "We're watching history die in real time." The ship's systems strained to calculate projections, showing entire sectors fading into red void. The universe itself seemed to shiver, as if aware of its own destruction. What began as data had become a nightmare made flesh. The storm was not chaos, it was purpose reaching for them. The silence that followed was worse than the storm's roar. Elara's console dimmed, her reflection pale against the void. She closed her eyes, hearing echoes of screams still vibrating in her mind. "We can't outfly this," she whispered. Kael leaned closer, his voice rough with old scars. "Then we find its heart and cut it out." His words struck her as madness, and truth bound in one. Outside the viewport, the storm's edges shimmered, like a predator circling prey. The crew watched in dread silence, knowing that their fate had been marked. Elara gritted her teeth, guilt and determination clashing. She had failed before, she could not fail again. Somewhere, faint signals still begged across frequencies. The universe was screaming, and she would not look away. The ship's scanners bled warnings across the panels. Elara's fingers flew, each command failing against data, too vast to compute. The storm devoured reality like a beast, faster than any model predicted. Kael folded his arms, saying, "Every fortress I built fell. This is no different." His bitterness cut deep, but she knew he was right. Numbers became screams on a screen, population counts blinking to zero. Elara muttered, "We're watching stars themselves die." The void beyond their glass felt thinner, like breathing air on the edge of fire. The crew exchanged glances, terror binding them together. Through static and chaos, one voice pushed through. A survivor screamed coordinates, pleading for rescue. Elara's chest tightened as her console pulsed with fading energy. Kael's eyes narrowed, his instincts already calculating the risk. "It's a trap," he warned. Elara's voice trembled. "It's hope." Her finger hovered over the control, torn between fear and compassion. Outside, the storm twisted brighter, as if mocking her hesitation. She shut her eyes, whispering, "No one deserves to be swallowed without a fight." The comm signal cracked again, dissolving into silence. The choice pressed down like a physical weight. A heavy clang echoed across the ship's docking bay. Kael turned, hand on his blade hilt as shadows stretched. A figure stepped into light, tall, scarred, armored, with eyes burning like steel. The crew stiffened as if facing a ghost of war. Elara's lips parted in disbelief. "You shouldn't be here," she said. The warlord smirked, his voice dripping with challenge. "Storms don't wait for permission." His presence filled the space with tension, an unwelcome ally forged from necessity. The galaxy's fate demanded choices, and she was running out of time. Elara sat alone in the dim chamber, the hum of the ship surrounding her like a constant reminder of how fragile they were. She stared at the storm data replaying endlessly on the screen. Every loss replayed in her memory, each decision that cost lives weighing heavily on her chest. She whispered, "I promised them safety, and I delivered silence." Kael stood behind her, his voice low. "You are alive because you don't give up. That is what makes you dangerous to the storm." She clenched her fists, haunted by the faces of those she couldn't save. Her reluctance to lead clashed with the desperate need she felt from her crew. If she failed again, the galaxy would not forgive her. She forced her breath steady, knowing guilt would not be enough to carry them through. Kael walked through the cargo bay, his boots echoing against steel. His eyes scanned crates, filled with relics of past wars, reminders of what he once commanded and lost. He muttered, "I built empires from ash and watched them crumble faster than fire." Elara followed, sensing the weight of his confession. He continued, "I was a leader once, but my men died believing I could not be broken. They were wrong." His voice carried bitterness, but beneath it was a scarred vulnerability. Elara felt the heaviness of his history colliding with her own fears. He bore his downfall like armor, but she saw the fracture within. She whispered, "If we both carry ghosts, perhaps they can guide us instead of haunt us." The ship's chapel flickered with warm lights as Mara, the confidant, adjusted the worn symbols on the wall. Her presence radiated calm, a counterpoint to the storm outside. She looked at Elara and said gently, "You don't lead because you want to. You lead because you cannot ignore those who need you." Elara lowered her gaze, whispering, "What if I break them again?" Mara stepped closer, her voice firm yet kind. "Then you rise with them. Leadership is not perfection. It is persistence." Her words seeped into Elara's doubts like light through cracks. For the first time, Elara's breath eased, not with certainty but with hope. The survivor sat hunched in the corner of the medbay, eyes darting, body tense as though expecting the storm to crash through steel walls. His hands trembled as he spoke. "It doesn't just kill, it whispers, it knows." Elara's chest tightened at his words, realizing his scars ran deeper than flesh. His voice cracked as he recalled fleeing from the collapse of his homeworld. Kael studied him, suspicion and respect mingling in his eyes. "You survived what no one else could," Kael said. The survivor shook his head. "I didn't survive. I was spared." The words hung like a curse, filling the room with unease. In the ship's central corridor, a young figure moved nervously, their eyes wide at the sight of consoles flickering with storm data. Elara paused, watching the innocence that seemed so out of place among the hardened faces of her crew. The young scholar looked up and said softly, "I can read the patterns, they speak to me." Mara's eyes widened, recognizing the spark of destiny in the child's words. Elara knelt, whispering, "You might be the key we didn't know we had." The crew exchanged wary glances, their hardened hearts shaken by the purity of hope. The storm might consume worlds, but in this fragile innocence, there was a light that refused to fade. The ship trembled as the storm's tendrils clawed against its shields, sparks erupting across the hull. Alarms wailed while the crew held their breath, every vibration echoing doom. Elara shouted commands, her voice cracking against the roar. "Divert all power to shields." Kael stood firm, his hand gripping the railing, eyes locked on the swirling chaos outside. "This is the beast's true face," he muttered, his tone grim. Dorian covered his ears, as whispers seemed to slither through the comm system, words no one could understand yet all could feel. Mara whispered a prayer, her lips trembling with every syllable. The storm was not merely energy but intent, pressing against their minds. Elara gritted her teeth and declared, "We face it together or not at all." The scanners revealed impossible patterns across the storm, shapes forming like skeletal hands and eyes opening in the void. Elara leaned closer, sweat dripping as she whispered, "It's not random. It's thinking." Kael crossed his arms, his scar catching faint light, and said bitterly, "Then someone built it." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, each wondering what force could engineer such horror. Lyra stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "The storm speaks through frequency. It has structure. It's language." Mara's breath caught, fear and awe colliding in her eyes. The crew realized the storm was not an accident. It was communication disguised as annihilation. Beneath the hum of consoles, tension shifted in shadows. Kael's gaze sharpened on Rin, once trusted for steady hands, now too quiet, too watchful. Rin's eyes flickered toward Elara Seep with a hunger veiled in loyalty. He said smoothly, We should retreat before this ship burns. Leadership requires knowing when to cut losses. Elara bristled at his words, sensing the venom behind the suggestion. Mara's expression hardened, but she said nothing, watching betrayal take root. Kael growled under his breath. You sound like a man waiting to inherit ruins. Silence pressed heavy, and trust fractured within the crew. As the storm clawed closer, a hidden signal cut through, encrypted but deliberate. The ship's system strained, decoding fragments of a voice cloaked in static. Elara's brows furrowed as she whispered, "Someone is guiding us." A hooded figure appeared across the hologram, face obscured but tone sharp. "You can survive this, but you must not trust everyone on your deck." Kael stepped forward, fists clenched. "Who are you?" The hidden ally ignored him, instead showing coordinates beyond the storm. The figure's voice cut deeper. "The storm is a weapon. Its master waits." Then silence swallowed the signal, leaving only dread behind. The storm lashed violently against the shields, rocking the ship until consoles sparked. Elara grabbed the railing, shouting, "Hold course!" Dorian cried out, "It wants us broken. It feeds on fear." Mara pressed her hand to his shoulder, whispering words of strength. Kael barked orders, forcing steadiness into the chaos. Lyra clutched the console, murmuring, "The storm is alive, but it fears fire." Elara seized the hint, rerouting power into a surge that blazed against the storm's tendrils. For a heartbeat, the storm recoiled. The crew gasped, unity binding them as survival clawed its way back into possibility. The bridge fell silent as Rin stepped forward, his eyes cold with ambition. He spoke with false calm, "We followed a leader who drags us into ruin. It is time for strength, not hesitation." Elara's chest tightened as the words struck like knives. Kael growled, his hand hovering near his blade. "You betray her now, while the storm claws at our throat." Rin smirked, his voice cutting. "Survival demands sacrifice, and I will not burn for her doubts." Mara's face twisted with sorrow, whispering, "You would tear apart hope for power." The crew's unity cracked, tension snapping like a cord pulled too tight. Betrayal was no longer suspicion. It was fact, and it bled through every breath on the deck. Elara's grip on the railing trembled as she fought to steady her voice. She said, "You think power makes a leader, but it is sacrifice that earns loyalty." Her eyes burned with fury she rarely revealed. Rin sneered, stepping closer. "Sacrifice is weakness wrapped in hope. I will not die for broken promises." Kael slammed his fist into the console, sparks flashing. "You sound like every tyrant I destroyed," he spat. The storm's glow outside flickered violently, as though it sensed their fracture. Mara whispered, "The storm does not destroy as cruelly as mistrust does." Silence followed, sharp as a blade. The storm shifted, and suddenly a new signal pulsed through the static, powerful and deliberate. A booming voice filled the bridge, icy and commanding. "Your galaxy clings to illusions. I hold the storm, and I will decide who is worthy." Elara froze, her heart sinking as the truth unfolded. This was no wild phenomenon, but a controlled weapon. Kael's face hardened, recognition burning in his eyes. "I know that voice. Once he called himself savior. Now he is executioner." The crew's dread deepened as the storm was no longer faceless. It had a master, and he had chosen this moment to reveal himself. The hidden alley's encrypted signal returned, slicing through chaos. The hooded figure's voice was sharper now. "You face a storm built from ancient technology, long buried and stolen. Its master wields power that should never have awakened." Elara leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "How do we stop it?" The figure's reply was cryptic yet urgent. "Beyond the storm's heart lies the key. But trust within your ship is as fragile as your shields." Kael snarled, "You speak in riddles while we bleed." The alley's hood dipped slightly. "Truth spoken too soon kills faster than lies." With that, the signal fractured into silence again, leaving riddles and dread in its wake. Mara stood before the crew, her calm cracking under the storm of betrayal and revelation. She said, "Faith is tested not by peace but by fire. We must choose whether we believe in each other or fall as dust. Her voice shook but carried weight. Elara felt the sting of doubt, yet Mara's words forced her to lift her chin. Kael's jaw tightened, torn between rage and resolve. Rin's smirk faltered for the first time, as eyes turned on him. Dorian whispered, "We will die if we break apart." The storm howled louder outside, pressing against steel like judgment itself. The storm's core unfolded on the scanners, revealing its structure like a massive machine wrapped in chaos. Elara's voice shook as she whispered, "It's no natural force. It was built." Kael slammed his fist on the console. "A weapon, older than our wars, built to erase civilizations." Dorian trembled, his eyes wide with horror. "I felt its hunger. Now I know why." Mara's face was pale, her faith straining under the weight of revelation. Who could wield such terror? Elara exhaled sharply, her thoughts racing. The storm was not an accident. It was deliberate, controlled, and aimed directly at them. Lyra's hands trembled as she pointed at the storm's patterns, her voice clear but fragile. "It sings to me. It's not random. The rhythm is a code, and I can feel it." Elara's chest tightened, realizing the young scholar might hold the key they needed. Mara whispered, awe softening her voice, "You were meant to see what we could not." Kael narrowed his eyes, torn between belief and fear. If she is the key, then she is also the target. Lyra looked down, her innocence trembling under the weight of destiny. "I never asked for this," she whispered. Elara placed her hand over hers. "None of us did, but we stand together." Dorian's voice cracked as he stared out the viewport, the storm raging like a living beast. "I saw what waits inside. It devours souls as well as bodies." His hands shook violently as he clutched the medbay railing. Elara's breath caught. "You escaped its heart," she said softly. Dorian's eyes filled with dread. "No, I was let go. It wanted me to bring the warning." Kael muttered, his tone sharp, "A survivor is a message." Mara's voice faltered as she added, "Or a weapon to spread fear." Dorian's scream broke through, raw and agonized. "It remembers me." The room fell silent, crushed by the weight of his terror. The antagonist's voice returned, deep and commanding, resonating through the storm. "Elara, I offer you what no one else can, power to rewrite your failures. Save them all, or let them vanish." Elara froze, her heart torn open by the promise. Kael snarled, his voice filled with fire. "Do not listen. Every tyrant offers salvation through chains." The crew's eyes turned toward her, fear and trust battling within their stares. The storm roared louder, pressing temptation into her bones. She whispered, "He knows my scars." Mara stepped closer, her voice steady. "And he will use them to break you." The choice loomed, heavier than the void itself. The tragic hero stepped forward, his voice ragged with exhaustion and guilt. "I carried my sins long enough. Let me carry this one too." His eyes met Elara's, filled with sorrow and resolve. "If I can buy you time, maybe I'll finally be more than my failures." Elara's throat tightened as she whispered, "Don't do this." He smiled faintly, a ghost of the man he once was. "I was already gone the day I turned away from hope." Without waiting, he activated the override, his body bathed in searing stormlight. The crew screamed his name as he vanished into fire. Sacrifice had found him, and redemption burned with him. The ship's alarms blared as enemy vessels surged from the storm's shadows, their hulls glowing with the same energy that fueled the cosmic weapon. Kael shouted, "Battle stations!" His voice cut through fear like steel. Elara's fingers flew across controls, channeling power into the cannons. The bridge shook as the first barrage struck, metal screaming in protest. Lyra clutched her console, whispering codes she barely understood, her eyes reflecting the storm. Mara prayed under her breath, her words woven with trembling faith. The crew fought with desperation, but the enemy fleet loomed endless. The climax had begun, and survival was no longer certain. A sudden breach rocked the starboard flank as fire cascaded across steel corridors. Rin emerged from the smoke, his weapon drawn, smirking in betrayal. "I warned you," he hissed, firing into consoles. Sparks erupted as systems collapsed. Elara turned, her voice burning with rage. "You've doomed us for your ambition." Rin sneered. "I chose survival, not martyrdom." Kael lunged forward, blade flashing in the chaos. The two clashed violently, steel against desperation, their struggle reflecting the fracture of the crew itself. Mara cried out, "Stop this! We're breaking apart while the galaxy burns." But her plea was swallowed by war. The bridge trembled as Elara rose, her voice breaking through the storm of chaos. "Listen to me. We are not fragments. We are one." Her words struck like lightning, piercing through fear. Dorian staggered forward, blood on his temple, whispering, "She's right. It feeds on division." Lyra lifted her hands, storm code flickering across her databands. Mara placed her hand on Elara's shoulder, whispering, "They follow your fire, not your doubts." Kael finally broke free from Rin's clash, stepping beside her with grim resolve. For the first time, the crew's voices aligned, not in despair, but in unity forged through fire. The hidden ally's image returned, sharper than before, cloak shimmering with urgency. "You need to know the truth," the voice cut, slicing through static. "I was part of the order that built the storm. It was meant to protect the galaxy, not consume it." Elara's eyes burned with fury. "Then why unleash it?" The figure's hood lowered slightly, revealing weary eyes. "Because power corrupts, and its master was once my brother." Gasps echoed across the bridge as betrayal spread deeper than imagined. Kael snarled, "Blood forged this storm. Blood must end it." The truth reshaped everything they believed. The storm's core pulsed violently, tendrils of energy wrapping around the ship as countdown warnings blared. Elara shouted, "Now, aim everything at its heart." Lyra's voice cracked as she decoded the final sequence, unlocking a surge of light. Kael gripped controls, sweat rolling down his scarred face, and growled, "Fire!" The cannons erupted, searing beams slicing into the storm's core. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the storm screamed, a sound of galaxies dying and reborn. The ship shook violently, but for the first time, the storm recoiled. Hope had cut through despair, but at a cost none had yet measured. The storm's master appeared one final time, his voice thundering through the collapsing chaos. "You cannot kill what was made eternal," he roared. Elara's face hardened, her voice steady. Even eternity bends when faced with those who refuse to surrender. Kael gripped the controls, his knuckles white, and pushed the final strike forward. The ship's weapons lit the void with blinding fire, cutting through the enemy fleet. Mara's whispered prayer rose above the roar, binding their wills together. Thorn cracked open, its master's voice fading into a scream swallowed by light. The galaxy held its breath. The ship reeled as shockwaves thundered across space, tossing the crew from their stations. Sparks rained down like falling stars, while consoles shattered under strain. Dorian cried out, clutching his side, blood streaking his survival suit. Lyra clung to the railing, her databands flickering as she whispered the final fragments of the storm's fading code. Elara steadied herself, shouting above the chaos, "Hold on! We're not finished yet." The storm's tendrils writhed like dying serpents before collapsing into silence. For the first time, the void beyond was dark and still. Silence fell as the storm's light faded into nothingness. The galaxy's stars reappeared one by one, shimmering like hope reborn. Elara's chest rose and fell, every breath carrying the weight of survival. Kael lowered his blade, his scarred face lit with relief, though his eyes carried the ghosts of those lost. Mara placed her hand on his shoulder, whispering, "They live because you chose to stand." Lyra collapsed to her knees, exhaustion flooding her body, yet her lips curved into a faint smile. The storm was gone, but its shadow would remain forever. The survivors gathered in the med bay, their bodies broken but their spirits unyielding. Dorian lay on a cot, his pale face softened by the faint glow of recovery lights. He whispered, "I thought I was cursed, but maybe I was spared for this moment." Elara touched his hand gently, her voice calm. "You endured the storm and gave us truth. That is survival's gift." Mara smiled faintly, her tired eyes reflecting pride. Kael stood at the doorway, silent, guarding the fragile piece like a sentinel forged by fire. For the first time, the crew felt more than survivors, they felt like family. Elara walked alone to the viewport, her reflection shimmering against the endless stars. The storm was gone, but its echo lingered like a scar across her soul. She whispered, "We fought a force that wanted silence, and instead, we gave the galaxy a voice." Kael's footsteps echoed behind her, but he did not speak. His presence was enough. Lyra's laughter drifted faintly down the corridor, fragile yet full of promise. Elara closed her eyes, the weight of leadership still heavy, yet lighter than before. The galaxy stretched before her, vast and uncertain, but alive. And for now, that was victory.